introduction. First of all, again, I'm Steve Maher. I'm with Risk Management Professionals. I am one of the engineers on staff. Background, my degrees in engineering are from Duke University and also Carnegie Mellon. I've been in this business for a while. A lot of you have seen my name around, hopefully in mostly positive contexts. I've been involved with the process safety arena since 1983. And as I mentioned this morning, after the Bhopal tragedy, it really brought a lot of this stuff front and center and really woke me up in terms of the importance of my job and the work that all the process safety professionals are doing. Now, for those of you who are aware of timelines for things, 1983 is way before PSM. Back then, you actually had to go and talk to management and convince management that it was a good idea to understand what the hazards were at their facility rather than just ignoring them and having it under attorney-client privilege if there was an accident at the plant site. Very different times, very different cultures, very different approaches to dealing with safety. I also had the honor and privilege of being on the original technical steering committee for the Center for Chemical Process Safety as we were responding to a lot of the issues and management system failures that had occurred as part of the Bhopal tragedy. So I've been doing this for a couple of years, and for those of you who have also been following Risk Management Professionals, we try to take a lot of those experiences and the essence of the things that we learn when we try to help folks pull their programs together and do that as part of the outreach programs, the webinars a lot of you have tuned into, and of course what we're trying to share today. So that's more than enough about me. What I'd like to do is tell you what's coming up. The next 15 minutes are going to be kind of like an executive summary of the longer presentation with more details that Jordan and myself are going to be providing and mixing up a little bit. And so what I want to do is the whole focus is on the changes that are on the horizon, the fairly near horizon for PSM and CalARP programs in California that are primarily focused on petroleum refineries. So we'll be talking about those expansion and modernization initiatives. But first I want to make sure we keep a perspective on things. This is the universe as it exists right now in terms of PSM, RMP, and CalARP, and also SEMS you may not be familiar with, is a similar program for offshore. When you look at these programs, and right now we're going to talk about the modernization efforts, which are obviously taking a paradigm shift in how you approach a bunch of elements. But when you look at the responsibilities of protecting offshore people and facilities using the SEMS program, protecting workers on site for onshore facilities with PSM, or trying to protect off-site people, the community, the environment with CalARP or RMP, you're really trying to prevent accidents. All those things that you do to prevent accidents revolve around managing safety at the facility. That's why you see such commonality between these various programs, and that commonality is still being carried forth in a relatively close synchronization between the updates that are currently being proposed for the CalARP program and also the 5189.1 PSM update that will apply to petroleum refineries. So even though there will be a desynchronization right now with the federal programs, the state programs, they're working hard to kind of keep them meshed and to keep moving forward in that direction. So what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about the agencies that are involved. I flashed this up this morning, didn't go into a lot of details. And also what I'd like to do is identify the website address in yellow on your screen, that if you've got a paper copy, maybe it's not in yellow, but this is an area that we try to keep up to date with respect to these developments. For those of you who have been following this, you know that CalARP is seeing a lot of changes with their Program 4 edition that will apply to petroleum refineries. The CalOSHA PSM program, the new 5189.1, a lot of these things are moving kind of fast. Updates are being provided. So you guys have been following it, know that there were several proposed programs that were put out, the latest update being September 24th, where CalOSHA was asking for comments and feedback on the draft regulations. This is changing, very dynamic situation. In fact, that's the whole theme of our seminar today, is the dynamic changes to the regulatory environment. We try to keep these encapsulated. I find this page a good reference. I hope you will too. And if you guys have some other ideas or things to make it a little bit more contemporary, up to date, feel free to give us a call or give us some suggestions, because there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of different agencies involved. CSB, the Chemical Safety Board, after they respond to most major incidents that have occurred in the United States within their jurisdiction. A key one that they followed up with is the August 6, 2012 event at the Richmond refinery. We'll be talking more about the recommendations they made, but a lot of those recommendations are focused on refineries and the California regulatory environment. And so a lot of those are the springboard for what's happening with the CalARP and the PSM programs. The Interagency Refinery Task Force, the IRTF, that's composed of a number of over a dozen agencies, and they're all taking a fresh look at refinery programs that are designed to maintain safety of plant personnel and also the community. Contra Costa County and the City of Richmond, they have industrial safety ordinances that are designed to emulate a lot of the management systems that you see in PSM and RMP, plus there's some additional nuances and some specificity for what they want to see at refineries in their jurisdiction. CalOSHA, as I mentioned before, as things are moving forward, there's actually going to be 2 PSM regulations in California. At least that's what's currently planned. For petroleum refineries, you've got a separate statute for 5189.1. For everybody else, it'll be 5189, and that'll be how PSM is designed to be covered in California for California facilities. OSHA, federal OSHA, the feds have a different rulemaking process. When they talk about changes and they're talking about jumping on top of things, to quote them, it's more in terms of years, not months, when they're talking about making changes. So even though they initiated a lot of changes to the PSM and RMP regulations at the federal level, several years ago, they really haven't drafted a completely new regulation, and they've only issued requests for information for comments on the things they were planning to do. I haven't seen this officially. My guess is they're kind of waiting to see what California does before they decide what to do with the regulations at the federal level. EPA, the same thing. They've issued a request for information, comments on that, and they've got a rulemaking process that will take quite a bit of time. The federal regulations, any changes that they do plan to make, will come into play long after California finishes its regulatory updates, and we'll talk about timelines in a few minutes. Last, and I should say but not least, since small pens here, is CalOES and CalEPA. They're right now springboarding the changes to the CalARP program. CalARP is going to be one program, and in that program is obviously going to be program levels 1, 2, and 3, as there always have been. There's a new program 4 level that is designed for petroleum refineries that closely emulates the separate PSM regulation that CalOSHA is putting out, 5189.1. There's going to be a lot of alphabet soup this afternoon. There's a lot of things happening. We try to keep that website in yellow as up to date as possible as these things are issued. And I'll also encourage any of the regulators that are listening in, if there's important things that industry needs to know, we're happy to post them there. And if you want to keep us up to date if we're missing something, it's really appreciated. So what has been happening? Again, a lot of as you saw from the photographs on the introductory slide here, there was a horrible tragedy in West Texas, and there was an accident at a petroleum refinery in the Bay Area on August 6, 2012, and those things kind of made the agencies want to take a fresh look at safety, and specifically refinery safety, and specifically in California. So there's been a lot of work done. At the federal level, EPA and OSHA, again, as I mentioned, the timeline is identified here. They have put out some requests for information, but haven't really promulgated or put out any new drafts yet. And on the second level on the screen, the Chemical Safety Board has put out 3 reports on the Richmond refinery accident, each with sets of recommendations. I'll be reviewing those in about 10 minutes to illustrate the sort of fundamental things that form the catalyst for a lot of the changes that are being made to CalARP and PSM right now. So the Chemical Safety Board and the White House's issuance of Executive Order 13650 have been pushing forward changes to the regulatory environment, and that's what we're here to talk about today. At the very bottom, the California agencies are the ones that you saw on the previous slide that are putting forth various initiatives and changes to the programs that do affect how safety management system issues are addressed at petroleum refineries in California. All right, as a reminder, here's the universe here's the requirements today. Okay, the new requirement, just to make sure it's crystal clear, the requirements that we're discussing are being proposed, they're put out for comment, and I think hopefully one of the things that will come out in the panel discussion today is a little bit of discussion on what the industry's comments have been on these draft regulations. But the environment today that you're very familiar with is a result of a lot of professionals looking at things for many decades. It's served everybody well. It covers a lot of the key issues. But what's happening right now is people are taking a fresh look at that. As part of the fresh look at that, there's a number of changes that are being proposed to existing elements and a number of new elements that are being introduced. I've color-coded them here for quote-unquote convenience based on my perception of what the potential impact is at a petroleum refinery in California. The impact, of course, varies based on each facility. Some facilities have a program that exceeds current requirements and will fit very easily into the new regime. Other facilities will have a lot of work to do to come up to speed to not only address other requirements for existing elements, but also some of the new elements, and I'll just go through those really quickly. The ones in blue here are ones that aren't changing dramatically, and you don't have to be too worried about. The other ones in red, good, it comes out a little bit better there, red, orange, and yellow in that order are things that you should pay particular attention to and have the potential for significantly increasing your workload or changing how you're addressing PSM and RMP and CalARP elements at your facility. Process safety information, not a lot of change. PHAs, not a lot of fundamental changes in technique or requirements specifically for PHAs, but safeguard protection analysis, which had previously been a separate element, is now absorbed into the PHA section and is considered an extension of PHAs. And I'll talk more about safeguard protection analysis shortly. Consider it a requirement that you justify the ability of safeguards to function and or implement LOPA as appropriate, layer protection analysis as appropriate, to justify the validity and effectiveness of safeguards. So that's in red because that could have a fairly big impact. Operating procedures, it's in yellow. It's not going to have be changed significantly, but there have been updates. Training contractors, PSSR, not a lot of changes. Mechanical integrity, there have been a few updates. It's in yellow. DMR, damage mechanism reviews. This is something that's directly tuned to what is perceived as a deficiency in the August 6, 2012 event, and is really focused on the integrity of your mechanical containment, piping, equipment, etc., corrosion issues, and also its ability to withstand variations in temperature and pressure that is perceived as being necessary to make sure that you maintain that containment and avoid the release of materials or things that can propagate into fires or explosions. We'll be talking more about DMR. All these items, we're going to provide a little overview and also some specific tips on what sort of things you can be doing now that are very easy, that can basically either buffer the amount of work that you need to do later or basically accommodate very simply some of the new requirements. HCA is hierarchy of hazard control analysis. For the most part, think inherently safer systems evaluation, but if there's a requirement to look at first and second order protection features and implement them unless you can justify not doing them. And we'll talk more about that shortly. That also has a potential for a significant impact on your facility, and there are things you can be doing now to address that. Hot work, not a big change. MOC, a little change. Incident investigation, there's a requirement for a root cause analysis. That's what the RCA stands for. For those of you who do incident investigations, you realize that depending on the nature of the incident, and of course PSM and CalARP are still going to be performance-based programs, but depending on the nature of the incident, you may apply different incident investigation techniques based on that. RCA is a push towards applying root cause analysis in more depth and more frequently to make sure that a thorough incident investigation is done. Emergency planning and response, not a lot of change. employee participation, a little change. Some of the items that are going to see a lot more infusion into your actual activities at the plant site, process safety culture assessments. We talked about culture this morning, and we had a really good question that came up during the panel discussion. That's going to be an area that Jordan's going to talk about that can have a significant potential impact. Human factors, and also management of organizational change. This is one that has always been treated, and from what my observation has been, informally and very qualitatively, and there's a requirement for more in-depth assessment as your organization changes, and when do you trigger that assessment too. So that's going to be a fairly big impact. And then, of course, compliance audits, and also the PSM program, the management program. Now, I focused on the Cal-OSHA PSM elements for 5189.1 because they're not totally synchronized with the location in the document, or even if they're blended together in some cases. DMR is absorbed into mechanical integrity for the CalARP program, but it's not for the PSM program that's done by Cal-OSHA. So there are differences. So for simplicity, we're just going to focus on the names, location, and references for PSM. All right, so anyhow, just want to give you a little overview. We're going to be going over these in a lot more depth as Jordan and I get rolling on the details of our presentation. And also, just to give you a snapshot of the timeline, this is a timeline that was established in early summer in terms of what the agencies are doing to roll out these changes to PSM and CalARP. Pretty much they're on track. September 24th, another update was done, and it went out for comments from industry. I know we commented on one item, and I'm sure a lot of folks here did too. The Cal-EPA, Cal-OES, and Cal-OSHA, and with support from the other agencies, are going to be going through those comments and implementing them as appropriate. The overall timeline, I'll let some of the folks who are directly involved in this tell me if something's changed, but the last I heard is they're shooting for mid-2016. Okay, maybe towards the end of 2016? Okay, so there's probably it looks like there's going to be a little extension of this, but even so, end of 2016, we're talking 12 months, and there's a lot of work to do. We'll be talking about how to make the most of that shortly.